Hello. Today I'll be explaining to you why raiding a castle during medieval times sucked. When you think of medieval times, your mind may wander to epic stories like Lord of the Rings, perhaps films about knights and royalty, or even an isekai anime. However, for most people, life was not this fantastical. The year is 1373, and you've just finished plowing your land for the 100th time. Then the local lord shows up and demands unreasonable taxes while half your crops are dying. On top of that, you've waited 10 years for the Playboy Cardi album to drop, then you listen to it. In a bold act of liberation, you decide to gather your friends and gear up with whatever weapons you can find to storm the castle. Before you even got close to the castle walls, the first thing standing in your way was a storm of arrows and bolts. Unless, of course, you were a Twitter warrior, because then dodging every single one would be easy, because that'd be serving a purpose. Archers were a formidable force, capable of slowing or even stopping a well-armed raid. With their range, precision, and advantage of high ground, they were invaluable on the battlefield. Two long-ranged weapons dominated this era. Firstly, the longbow. The longbow was a key weapon with draw weights of up to 140 pounds, requiring years of training. Sadly, plate armor completely mocked the longbow. By the 15th century, suits of Milanese armor and similar variants are becoming more common. With curved surfaces that minimized energy transfer, this type of armor had no problem defending against arrows. A skilled archer might aim for openings between the faceplate of the helmet, the joints, or thinner areas like the gauntlets or feet to bypass the protection. But even then, hitting those spots was no easy task. It was like trying to get an ace in CSGO with 4 drunk Europeans yelling in your ear. The second weapon which dominated the ranged meta more and more during the high medieval ages was the crossbow, some variations reaching a draw weight of over 1200 pounds. About the same amount of tension you feel after saying a Jewish joke around your new friend, before realizing it was not a baseball cap on his head. From close range, these heavy crossbows could deliver enough force to penetrate plate armor with the advantage of not being as difficult to use as a regular bow. Given that well-crafted sets of armor would cost the modern equivalent of 50,000 USD, or around a million Canadian loonies, unless you were hitting crazy parlays on jousting, you were in trouble. By some miracle, your friend's faith managed to pay off, and you made it past the archers. However, there was still a long way to go. Castles were often surrounded by moats, typically filled with water, and these moats were rather deep. For my Americans, it was about 2 C5 Corvettes deep, and for the rest of the world, about 9 meters. Moats had many uses. They made quick access to the walls difficult, keeping soldiers at bay, and those who could cross would be wet, cold, and vulnerable to attacks from atop the walls. Another use for the moat was to keep siege machines away from the walls, for example, a battling ram, which would be used to gain access through the gate or demolish a wall. Moats were also sometimes connected to sewage, meaning every soldier that swam across had the potential to start a new pandemic so bad alchemists would argue about which empire's lab it came from. If you manage to cross all wet and smelling like a fundamentals of programming lecture, you'll be faced with the wall. Oftentimes, ladders were used in an attempt to gain control of the upper battle floors and access the castle. However, the defenders were usually ready. Historians still debate whether they poured hot oil, boiling water, or heated sand on invaders, but one thing's for sure, rocks were cheap, plentiful, and very effective at taking a soldier out of the fight or turning them into a League of Legends player. Even if you manage to get past the gates, you'll be surrounded by kill holes, openings in the castle's structure used by defenders to rain arrows, boiling liquids, or even take a shit on you. Some castles even had false entrances, leading incoming raiders into dead ends. Raiding a castle sucked, but if you were to form a proper army and fail the immediate raid, the next step would be to lay siege to the fort. This would begin by setting up camps outside the castle and bringing in siege machines such as trebuchets. Before the widespread use of gunpowder weapons like cannons, which would absolutely obliterate walls, siege machines were not always as effective, with some accounts stating that some castle walls were so thick the only thing trebuchets left behind was a mark. Trebuchets were still a very valuable weapon, often used to throw boulders over the wall and wreak havoc on the town within. If this was not enough to encourage a surrender, the siegers would encourage them to do so by withholding supplies and food from the castle, leaving those inside in a dire situation that often led to surrender. If the castle still persisted, the attackers would commonly dig tunnels underneath the walls and then burn down the supports, collapsing the tunnels and destroying the castle walls, then going in and brutally murdering everyone. I hope you learned something about medieval raids and why they were brutal and, why they sucked. If you like the video, there's a 50-50 chance shawarma appears under your pillow at night, yes. And the 50-50 chance 2 shawarmas appear if you subscribe.